Welcome to the first monthly roundup of 2026. And these are the books that I read in the month of January. Hi, my name is Hina and I love reading books. And last year I managed to read around 145 books. But this year I'm going to take it a little slow because I already have 12 editing projects. But you know what? This year I'm going to concentrate more on reading philosophy, world history, and a bit of world literature again. So my reading choices are going to be a bit influenced by that. Anyway, as I was saying, I'm going to concentrate on reading maybe a bit less, but way more meaningful and way less only fiction. It's hard, I know, but we gotta do what we gotta do. Anyways, so let's get to the book that I read in the month of Jan. So the first book that I started reading this year is actually Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. So this is one of the first books that I read this year. It is an amazing book. I absolutely loved it. It is such an entertaining read. So you get to see the academic version of hell. And that is all I'm going to say about this book, because this book is kind of less about the story, but more about the experience of reading it. The settings in this are an amazing example of how settings can be a character in themselves. So this book is so exceptionally rich in world building that I obviously could not help but fall in love with this. This book is good if you like good writing, really unusual characters. Also, this book is really layered. Like, I really liked it, but not in a very philosophically heavy way. It is actually a quite light read. For its size and the author's credentials, this book is actually pretty light. You might find a couple of words that you might be hearing for the first time. So that way, language is actually pretty good. But except for those couple of words, I don't think this book is going to feel heavy. I certainly did not think so. I really liked it. And my overall rating for this book is 4 out of 5 stars. And now I've heard a lot of praise for Yellowface, and I do have that book. So I'm going to read Yellowface by the same author, R.F. Kuang, and then maybe compare these two books by her. Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to talk about a book that genuinely surprised me in the best way. If you enjoy espionage thrillers that go beyond surface level action, this one is worth your attention. Set against the backdrop of the Cold War, the story revolves around a high-stakes race to protect US stealth technology from falling into Soviet hands. But what makes it compelling isn't just the plot, it's the people or the characters driving it. At the center of the novel are Gabrielle Hyde, a master thief who is always 10 steps ahead, and CIA officer John Olson, who starts off grounded in duty and structure but is slowly forced into morally complex territory. What begins as a classic cat and mouse dynamic evolves into something far more complex and layered. A battle of intelligence, ideology, and survival. What I particularly appreciated is how the book explores systems such as intelligent agencies, bureaucracy, and loyalty, and the ways they bend people. It's not just about the stolen technology, it's about what people are willing to compromise in the name of patriotism, control, or even personal redemption. Now, I will say it's dense in parts. There's a lot happening at a couple of places in the book, and the pacing can feel intense. But if you like thrillers that are ambitious, character-driven, and intellectually engaging, this one really delivers. Stealing Stealth by Brian L. Reece. If that sounds like your kind of read, I've linked Stealing Stealth in the description box below. Definitely check it out. Now let's get back to the video. This book that I picked up this year I like saying that. The next book that I picked up in Jan was The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, if that's the correct pronunciation. The Power of Habit is one of the best books in the world on habit. And in this book, the author gives exceptionally amazing examples of how the power of habit, especially as a collective, as a society, because that was the part that I found the most interesting in this book. So the author really goes into detail into how we collectively as a society have these habits and according to which we act, and of course how to leverage those habits to your advantage. And there are some exceptionally good examples, especially the two amazing examples that I loved were, one was of Rosa Parks and the second one was of the Pepsodent story. So this book is really good. If you like self-development and if you like improving yourself bit by bit, habit by habit, want to cultivate a new habit, want to understand the psychology of how habits are formed, and I think this book is really good in the long run. And this is again not a book that you can just read and kind of apply. There are so many good amazing things in this book that you need to come back to again and again, as at least that's what I feel. So I've marked a lot of things that I will be going to again and again whenever I would want to develop a new habit and maybe I'm failing to do so. So it has a lot of good stuff. So I would rate this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in January is The Vegetarian by Han Kang. This is an exceptionally short book, and trust me when I say this is one of the heaviest books that I've ever read. My God. Okay, and I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure if I like the ending as much as I like the beginning of this book. The beginning is quite light, but it gets so heavy I actually had to distance myself from this book for almost 20 days. So I won't say that this is like for everyone. A lot of people are reading it just because it's been written by a Nobel Prize winning author, but I really don't think this book is for everyone. If you are into deeply philosophical works and you really like them, then maybe you can go for this book. But otherwise, I did feel that this was exceptionally heavy, and it was also to some extent a bit triggering. And if you get triggered easily, then I would say stay away from this book. The Vegetarian. I would rate it, and this is gonna hurt, 3 out of 5 stars. Not my cup of tea. I read a lot of body horror books, so it actually takes a lot to make me feel so repelled by an idea. And this book did something like that. Not exactly, but in a way, something like that. And it highly triggered me. So as I had to stay away from this book for a long while, I would rate it 3 only. Because as you know, 2 stars actually are for me bad books. And this is not a bad book. This is just a very heavy book. And this was actually not something that I wanted to, that I needed to read at the start of the year. So I'm just gonna keep this book away from myself, and I'm not gonna get back to this anytime soon. The next book that I read is Alchemised, as I promised in my last video, by Sen Lin Yu. This book, I have actually a lot to say about this book, and I'm actually thinking of doing a separate video for this book. For now, I can tell you that this is a very entertaining book. And I have no idea why I'm doing that, but you know, it's such a big book. It took a lot of my time, and at one point it even gave me back pain, but still I stuck to it and I read it and I finished it. And I'll tell you what, finishing this book was not a big task because it was just so entertaining. So you just kept on reading and reading. But you know what? The book actually showed or had a lot of potential when it started, but somewhere by the end of the second act and by the starting of the third act, it kind of fell flat on its face. And I hate when a book does that, especially a big book like this. The book just kind of sets up so much expectation and then you do not get that payoff. It hurts, it really hurts to read such a big book and not have that payoff. But if you love mostly YA fantasy, then you are going to absolutely love this book. But if you are more in adult fiction that does not have too much to do with extremely young people or teenagers, then you might find the ending, I don't even know how to put it mildly, unamusing. You will find it unamusing. Anyway, this is not a shade for YA writers or readers. I have read some amazing YA books. I am actually a very big fan of Hunger Games. But I hate it when writers actually take the concept of YA very lightly and kind of, just think that they can actually get away with anything just because their characters are kind of in that age and they do not mature the characters properly, then it is a big problem. So I would say if I am to rate the book only according to the first act or maybe the first half of the book, I would say, I would actually give it 5 out of 5 stars. But when that later part comes in and the entire thing gets destroyed and then the book literally becomes a long series of reflections or just perspective reflections, I would say, that keeps on telling the reader more and more about the protagonist's life, the stars start to drop from my rate. And they end up at 3 out of 5 stars for this big book. Had a lot of potential. I know this book has literally a cult following. But this book could have been so much better. If I would have been the editor of Sen Lin Yu's this book, I would have literally edited out the last part of the third act, like entirely. You did not need that. I mean, why? Anyway, so my rating for this book dropped from 5 to 3 in the last act itself. And it was very painful because after reading such a long book, I had a lot of expectations from the book. I really wanted my time to be well spent on the entire book and not just about this much of the book. But you know what it is. And I really wanted to read it because I wanted to see what was there in this book. I'm not too sure if I'll be reading more books by the author, but I'm definitely going to cherish this big book as it really looks good. And the stuff about alchemy was actually pretty cool. There are a lot of good things in this book, but I think if you are 30 plus, you might actually not have that much patience to be learning about the lives of some newly teenage turned young adult's life so much. So I don't know, I just wasn't invested in the characters' lives that much to be spending literally almost 4 or 5 days just reading about that. So anyway, this is my review for Alchemised. I give it 3 out of 5 stars. It's an okay-ish book. The last and the final book that I read this month is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. This book is good. It's amazing. It is so short, yet it is so powerful. This book is an exceptional work of science fiction. Now, as I said, I do like philosophical fiction, and certainly if it's written this way, then I really like it. But if it's written in the way The Vegetarian is written, I'm not into it. But anyway, I'm not going to compare these two books because they are two completely different genre altogether. But if you have to read something that's philosophical as well as very original, as well as have amazing ideas that you really want to share with the reader, then this is how it's done. Anyway, so I don't want to leave any controversial statements here, but I would any day pick up this book than that. I loved every single page of this book, and I have a lot of quotes that I love from this book. If you would like to know what those quotes are, do let me know and I'll share my highlights with you guys in posts. So do let me know. Anyway, this book is amazing. I really loved it. And I would rate this 5 out of 5 stars. So finally, I have a 5 out of 5 book for January 2026. So these are the books that I read in the month of January 2026. Hopefully, I'll be reading a bit more, maybe not a lot, but a bit more in February. But given that I am again traveling in February and I do have 12 books to edit, I do not think I will be able to do that. But here's to hoping. So I will see you all in my next video. And do let me know what do you think about the vegetarian, because I would love to know. And it's okay if our views do not match, that's okay. But we all should feel safe enough and free enough to be able to voice our opinion. That's what I believe in. I'll see you all in my next video. Till then, bye-bye.